Hey, it's Blake from the Pixelist, and if you're looking to play Path of Exile 2 for the first time, but you're thinking, where the heck do I start? How do I play the game? This is the start of our series on how to learn how to play Path of Exile 2. Now, I played about 6,000 hours of Path of Exile 1. I haven't played it recently. I kind of fell out of playing it, but I deeply believe this is one of the best games out there. And I think Grinding Gear Games is one of the best companies out there. So if you're a fan of ARPGs and you're thinking, hey, I want to learn this game, I want to get into this game, maybe you're going to play early access, but you have no idea where to start, I thought we'd dive into our basically learn how to play the game series on Path of Exile 2. Now, I'll give this little bit of a disclaimer before any video I do in this series, in that this game is mechanically very dense. That can be a massive turnoff to players. But just know that a lot of the complexity is actually overblown and that there's some very simple ways to understand the game. And today, one of those things is ascendancies. Now, ascendancies is the best way to think of it. And if you've been following any of the hype around Path of Exile 2, you've probably read a lot of headlines about what's the strongest ascendancy, which ones are broken, all this stuff that's very clickbait. I would say, first of all, don't worry about any of that. And to put it very simply, what ascendancies are is these are effectively subclasses, or you could think of them as like hero classes. You play the game long enough and eventually you will unlock these special ability points that go to a special skill tree that will make your character stronger and also a bit more niche in the kinds of abilities that it has. If you're playing retail World of Warcraft, this would be like the hero classes we have on there with the special talent tree. I'm trying to think of other examples of games. Grim Dawn has something like this. Last Epoch has something like this. So it's not something you'd be unfamiliar to. Like I said, the best way to think of it is that it's like a subclass. Now, the way you unlock these subclasses is by doing the trials. The trials are effectively, think of them as special dungeons somewhere through the game that once you beat that dungeon, it gives you a couple of ascendancy points to use on your ascendancy skill tree. So talking about that further, let's actually look at this. Now, looking at the skill tree, I'll do a different video on the skill tree. This can be a massive turnoff for players who like open this and they're like, oh my gosh, where do I even start with this? I'll do, like I just said, I'll do a separate video on this. The quick thing I'll say about the skill tree is that it's really not bad. If you think about typical RPG or typical fantasy game, you usually have like your strength-based character or like your warrior. You typically have your dexterity-based character or like a bow user or ranger, and you typically have your spellcaster. And whether you've played original Diablo or you've played Gauntlet or whatever fantasy game you've played, there's typically those kinds of archetypes in that game. In a similar way, the Path of Exile skill tree is broken down with skill nodes that fall into one of those three buckets. And so this bottom right side is typically ranger styled or ranged type of abilities. This left side is typically more melee oriented. And then along the middle is typically a hybrid. Similarly, the top is typically oriented for spellcasters, and you'll see those blend with dexterity and strength on either side of the tree. Again, I won't get into it today, but that's the basics of it. Unfortunately, in Path of Exile 2, you are much less likely to brick your character by going into the wrong direction with your skill points. So, all that to say, once you unlock your ascendancy tree, this is going to be by doing your first trial in, again, that special dungeon that you'll come across. In Path of Exile 1, I think this was, for you guys who are long-term players, I think this was like around Act 6 maybe? Or maybe it was Act 3? I think it was Act 3 actually, is when you first got it, which was at the time, that was about a third of the way through the game. And so I'm assuming the pacing is going to be very similar for Path of Exile 2. But having said that, you're going to get, when you get your ascendancy points, you're going to be able to choose from one of three hero classes, one of three ascendancies. And the cool thing about Path of Exile is that every class, which there's 12 classes in Path of Exile 2, every class has 3 ascendancies. And they're not role oriented in the sense of like tank, healer, damage, if that's the kind of game you've come from. Again, these are more niche play styles. They're more directional in terms of the way you want to play the game. For example, there's not like a minion oriented one in Path of Exile 2, but in Path of Exile 1, there was the Necromancer for the Witch, which was all about minions, or you had the Oculist, which was all about, I think it was curses and things like that. So typically whatever subclass you choose, that's going to then dictate the style of gameplay that you're going to have and the kinds of goals you want to accomplish. So if you want to just speed through dungeons as fast as possible, you might prioritize one skill tree versus another, which might be more oriented for killing bosses. In Path of Exile 1, you had something called the Juggernaut, which was like a very tanky but melee-oriented class, and it changed a lot. So you guys who've played Path of Exile 1 more recently than me, this may not be true anymore. But at the time, it was really good at moving quickly while surviving, and it actually made for a really great trials runner, doing the trials as fast as possible. So here, I'm using the GitHub link that's on Path of Exile 2's website. You can find it right here. I don't know how accurate this is. I know the Ascendancies are fairly accurate because they released them, GGG released them recently. But jumping into this, you'll see that we only have 6 of the classes of the 12 that are in early access, and each one only has 2. So clicking on like the Titan, for example, if we look at this, your center starting point where your class is, you're going to see your skill tree open up. Now, before you choose your subclass, which I can't turn it off here, but until you choose your, get your ascendancy points, this will just be the graphic. You won't see the points here. But each one, let me zoom out so it's a little bit higher. I can't make it any higher res, unfortunately. But each one, you can know that there's a different pathway, different skill nodes you can get. And also, you only get 8 points total in Path of Exile 2 and in Path of Exile 1. So you're only going to be able to choose 8 of these nodes, unfortunately. So you can't choose all of them. You're only going to be able to choose 8 of them. So what that means is you're sort of sub-niching down your character a bit by choosing your hero class, and then you're niching it down even further by choosing, I mean, naturally people are going to probably choose whichever ones are the most powerful, but you have a lot of options there. So some examples here, we have some like survivability ones like Stone Skin, which gives you more armor, or Mysterious Lineage, which gives you more health. This would be maybe good choices for a hardcore character, where if you die once, your character's gone, basically. And then you have this note here that says surprising strength, you do 40% more damage against heavy stunned enemies. So you might decide, and by the way, if you're new to Path of Exile, one of the attractors to Path of Exile is the massive open canvas of builds that you can create. Different play styles, different ways you want to do your character. Let's say you want to play a heavy melee character who just stuns enemies and stuns bosses. Well, there's a build for that. And so you might choose this Ascendancy point because it'll give you the option then to do more damage as you're stunning bosses and enemies. So all that to say, again, every class is going to have its skill nodes. This is a much higher res one. The Mercenary, for example, has the Witch Hunter. This one has, I think this was the one that had Devastating Blow on it. Here we go. Where are you at? Which one is it? Which one is it? Oh man, is it not on here? Oh, here we go. Decimating Strike. So a hit against a full life enemy will remove between 5 to 30% of their life before the damage of the hit is applied. So this might be really strong for a boss, for example. If you're doing a boss build, maybe you want to just chunk out 30% of their health from the get-go. Now, the 5 and 30%, I don't know if that's truly random. They've also said that your ascendancies will get more powerful as you level up your character. So maybe 5% is like the starting one and 30% is the max. And as you get towards the level cap, you'll do more damage. But as we can see here, these are the minor nodes, which I can't cursor over, but I only get 8 of them. So out of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pathways, I could only choose 8 points total. So I could do 1, 2, 3, 4, and go up to Decimating Strike. And then I'm gonna have 4 more points to grab something else. Maybe Sorcery Ward, which makes you take less elemental damage. maybe I'll go that route. Or maybe I'll go No Mercy, which gives me the ability to do damage against their concentration. Now, one of the negatives of Path of Exile are like the terminology of like, well, what is concentration? What is decimating strike? You know, things like that, which can be difficult to follow. But just know that you'll learn it. It's not bad at all. But to sum everything up, again, the Ascendancies are your subclasses. Currently in Path of Exile 2, you cannot spec out of it. So you want to make sure you've reviewed the ones that you like and then choose accordingly, because once you commit to an Ascendancy, you can't change it. Now, you will be able to change the points within it, which has always been true for Path of Exile 1, and I'm assuming it's true for Path of Exile 2. So you'll be able to change points as you like it. But if you decide, you know what, I'm not really liking the Witch Hunter, I want to try the Gemling Legionnaire instead, which is all about buffing your skill points, your skill gem, excuse me. Or like, for example, in Path of Exile 2, you can only have one of a support gem. It's unique. It's unique equipped if you've played WoW. This is different from Path of Exile 1. This node will let you have 2 copies. So maybe you really like a certain support gem. You might say, you know what, I want to roll a new character and try doing Gemling Legionnaire. So summing everything up, they're your subclasses, they're your hero classes. You'll unlock your hero class once you do your first trial, which I would guess will probably be around Act 3 again. We'll see how it plays out in early access. And this is just further niching down your playstyle. My encouragement to you, if you're a min-maxer and you're thinking, what's the best? You can always check out Reddit. There's plenty of build guides you can follow for that. Otherwise, man, like I said, it's a massive canvas. Play what seems interesting to you, build the character that seems fun to you, and then you can always change it and do something else later. So anyway, I appreciate you following the channel, and best of luck. Enjoy Path of Exile 2.